Welcome to our channel, the place where unbelievable stories turn into jaw-dropping reality. Today we'll dive into an incredible journey. A janitor who got fired on Friday, but by Monday he was sitting in the powerful CEO's chair, outsmarting Wall Street itself. This 8-chapter story is packed with drama, from the days of humiliation and being underestimated to the stunning moment he flipped the game and seized control. It will take you from anger to pure satisfaction, leaving you cheering at every twist. This isn't just a tale of persistence and intelligence, but a timeless reminder to never underestimate anyone. If you want to witness shocking turnarounds and epic comebacks that silence even the strongest enemies, stay with us until the end. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our inspiring journeys. Friday, 4 p.m. The bustling office tower suddenly felt colder as the last rays of sunlight streamed through its massive glass walls. People rushed to pack their files, laughing, planning weekend dinners. But down in the basement, where nobody wanted to be, a middle-aged man was still quietly pushing a mop. His name was Marcus, a black janitor in a faded uniform, his shoes so worn out they squeaked with every step. Once, he had dreamed of working upstairs, where men in Armani suits argued over millions, even billions. But life had thrown him into the darkest corner of the building, cleaning up the trash those big shots left behind. He was used to it, or at least he told himself he was. But that Friday afternoon, everything changed. The company manager, a bloated man with a blinding red tie, as if the color itself screamed power, approached him, his face wrinkled into disdain, his voice sharp as nails. "Marcus, the company is cutting staff. Today is your last day. Pack your things." That was it. No thank you, no respect for 10 years of loyal cleaning. Marcus just stood there, mop still in hand, staring into those cold, indifferent eyes. And then he smirked, a bitter smile tinged with sarcasm. Fired on a Friday, as if his entire life could be reduced to one short afternoon. "Cutting staff, huh?" Marcus echoed softly before turning away. He didn't argue. But deep inside, a fire began to burn. Walking home past Wall Street's towering skyscrapers, Marcus felt both humiliated and amused. He had seen it all. CEOs stumbling drunk after lavish parties, investors screaming into phones like spoiled children, financial geniuses who couldn't even pick up a coffee cup when it fell to the floor. And then a thought hit him. If those clowns can be CEOs, why not me? Crazy? Maybe. But that thought made his steps faster. The sky grew darker, but in Marcus's eyes, the light was just beginning. Marcus returned to his tiny apartment in Brooklyn, a room barely big enough for an old bed, a wobbly wooden table, and a few faded family photos curling at the edges. He dropped into a chair, exhaling deeply, his eyes lost in the empty space. A middle-aged man, calloused hands, sweat-stained shirt, thrown out like garbage. But instead of crying or whining, Marcus laughed, a dry, hollow laugh soaked with bitterness. "All my life they've treated me like trash. And now they think they can just toss me away that easily?" he muttered. On the table lay an old financial newspaper. The front page showed a young, pale-faced CEO grinning beside a luxury car, headline screaming, "Wall Street's New Genius." Marcus picked it up, staring at it. Genius? That kid once spilled coffee in the office bathroom and called me to mop it up. And now he's a genius? He flipped through the pages, reading about deals worth hundreds of millions, even billions. But instead of feeling intimidated, Marcus felt amused, because he had heard those very deals whispered in boardrooms while he scrubbed the floors. He remembered the numbers, the words, the arrogance. What no one knew was that after every shift, Marcus wrote things down. In a battered notebook hidden under his pillow, he had built a strange treasure trove. Notes on IPO strategies, accounting tricks, investor psychology, things nobody believed a janitor could possibly understand. Marcus stared at that notebook, then out the window at the city lights glowing against the night. He let out a long breath, his eyes now burning with resolve. "They've given me freedom, and I'll use it to show them a janitor can shake Wall Street to its core." That night, he began to write, not cleaning schedules, but ideas, plans, pieces of a puzzle he had quietly collected for 10 long years. The pen scratched across the page, marking the start of a journey no one could predict. Marcus, the janitor fired on a Friday afternoon, had just planted the seed of an empire. The next morning, Marcus woke before the sun, Instead of pulling on his worn janitor's uniform, he buttoned up an old white shirt, pressed as neatly as possible. In the mirror, he didn't see a cleaner anymore. He saw a man about to enter a battlefield. He walked to a small cafe near Wall Street, a place where ambitious young workers gathered, bragging about stocks, markets, and investments they barely understood. Marcus sat quietly in a corner, notebook in hand. A few of the kids glanced at him and snickered. "Look at the old black guy with that beat-up notebook, probably writing love poems." They laughed, and Marcus heard every word. He didn't respond. He just smirked, jotting down more lines filled with formulas and charts. If only they knew he was mapping out financial loopholes in the very firms they dreamed of working for, their laughter would die in their throats. Years as a janitor had given Marcus a strange advantage. He saw and heard what others ignored, which CEO stumbled drunk, which analyst slipped confidential numbers, which shredded file ended up in the trash. He collected it all, piecing the puzzle together. Now, in his notebook, was an entire map. Networks between corporations, fatal flaws in financial systems, even secrets worth millions to keep buried. Marcus sipped his cheap coffee, his eyes gleaming. He felt like a wolf catching the scent of blood. "Come Monday," he whispered. "I won't be holding a mop. I'll be holding Wall Street." As he closed the notebook and stood to leave, the young waitress glanced at him absent-mindedly. She had no idea she had just witnessed the beginning of something that would shake a financial empire to its core. That evening, Marcus sat alone in a park by the Hudson River. The sky was fading into night, city lights shimmering on the water's surface. He opened his notebook, rereading every line, every note. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like someone disposable. He felt like a man holding the secrets of an entire world. In Marcus's mind, a reckless plan began to take shape. If he was no longer bound to cleaning floors, why not use everything he had heard, seen, and remember to step onto the financial chessboard? Not as a bystander, but as a real player. His phone buzzed. A message from his daughter, Sarah, a college student. "Dad, I'm worried about tuition this semester." "Are you okay?" Marcus stared at the screen, his heart tightening. Getting fired wasn't just losing a job. It meant risking his daughter's future. He clenched the phone in his fist, then slowly raised his head, eyes like steel. "No, I won't let them decide my fate. No one has that right." He rose to his feet, the night wind tugging at his thin white shirt. Every humiliation, every weary sigh, every wound from 10 years of being underestimated fused into a single surge of power. Marcus knew, come Monday, he wouldn't return to Wall Street as some jobless man wandering past. He would return as a challenger. A silent war had just been declared, and Wall Street had no idea what was coming. Monday morning, New York City woke up to the blaring horns, rushing crowds, and skyscrapers glowing in the early sunlight. Amid the chaos, Marcus walked with a stride unlike ever before. No mop cart, no faded green uniform. Today he wore a second-hand suit, slightly tight, a bit worn, but it transformed him completely. He arrived at the towering financial building where he once bowed his head to scrub stains off the floor. Now he lifted his chin, eyes fixed on the gleaming, revolving doors. For a moment hesitation flickered, then he gripped the notebook tighter. Marcus didn't have a security badge. He wasn't an employee anymore. But instead of faltering, he walked right in, flashing a calm smile at the receptionist. "Good morning. I have a meeting with Mr. Harrison, the investment director." A lie.
A bold one.
But Marcus said it with such steady confidence that it sounded real. The receptionist hesitated, picked up the phone to confirm. While she spoke, Marcus's eyes scanned the lobby. Gleaming glass walls, suited workers hurrying past. But for Marcus, it wasn't the same place anymore. This was no longer where he cleaned. This was an arena. The receptionist frowned after hanging up. "Sorry, sir, I don't see any appointment for you with Mr. Harrison." Marcus didn't flinch. He smiled. "Oh, his secretary must have forgotten to update the schedule." "No problem, I'll wait. Just tell Mr. Harrison that Marcus is here. He'll understand." Something about the way he said it, confident, unshakable, made the receptionist nod reluctantly. Marcus sat down in the lobby, opened his notebook, and began writing. He knew one thing, in this world, sometimes all it took was confidence and the right words to open doors to power. For the first time in his life, Marcus wasn't standing outside looking in. He had stepped into the battlefield, and there was no turning back. Marcus sat in the lobby pretending to wait for an important meeting. Around him, young employees rushed past, glued to their phones or files, not sparing a glance for the black man with the battered notebook. Then, from the elevator, a man with graying hair and a gray suit stepped out. Harrison, the investment director Marcus had just claimed to meet. Harrison's eyes narrowed. "Marcus?" Marcus rose immediately, shook his hand firmly, and said with steady confidence, "Yes, that's me. I know your schedule is packed, but I only need 10 minutes to share an idea I'm certain you'll find interesting." Harrison hesitated. He couldn't recall scheduling this, but Marcus's confidence made it awkward to dismiss him outright. With a quick glance at his watch, he nodded. "Fine. Come with me." Marcus followed him into a small meeting room. His heart pounded, but his face remained calm. Once the door shut, Harrison crossed his arms. "All right, let's hear it. Who exactly are you? And what idea?" Marcus inhaled, opened his notebook, and flipped to a page crammed with numbers and diagrams. He pointed to a cash flow chart. "This is the weak point in Dunford Capital. They're hiding toxic debt by moving it through a subsidiary. If you act now, you can turn the situation around and make an enormous profit before the scandal explodes." Harrison's eyes widened slightly. The information was disturbingly accurate, something he'd only seen in confidential reports. He straightened, his tone suddenly serious. "Where did you get this?" Marcus leaned in, a faint smile on his lips. "Sometimes the janitor hears more than the men in suits ever notice." Silence filled the room. Harrison stared at Marcus, skeptical, intrigued. For the first time, Marcus had forced a Wall Street heavyweight to truly listen. Harrison leaned forward, eyes sharp as blades. He was used to people knocking on his door, begging for chances, flaunting their so-called billion-dollar ideas. But Marcus was different. This man wasn't afraid. He wasn't desperate. "Who are you, really?" Harrison asked, his voice low but heavy as steel. "You're not an analyst, not a broker. So how do you have these numbers?" Marcus raised his head, calm yet unwavering. "I'm nobody. Just a man who spent 10 years walking past boardrooms, cleaning trash, mopping floors, and listening. You're surprised I know so much? I'm more surprised that the men in those rooms let slip so much." Harrison frowned, leaning back in his chair. He studied every move, every breath Marcus took. The man showed no fear. "Do you realize," Harrison said slowly, "if what you're telling me is true, I could make a fortune?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Enough for you to remember my name, and enough to make Dunford Capital bow." The air in the room grew heavy. Harrison stared at Marcus, and Marcus stared right back, silent, daring him. Finally, Harrison let out a short laugh, half skeptical, half intrigued. "All right, Marcus, I'll test it."
"But if you're lying—"
"You'll regret it." Marcus nodded, closing his notebook. "Mr. Harrison, I've got nothing to lose, but you do." The reply froze Harrison for a beat. A man dismissed his whole life was now speaking like someone holding a knife at the throat of Wall Street itself. Harrison stayed silent for a long time. He was used to liars and showmen, but he had never seen anyone like Marcus, a janitor with fire in his eyes, speaking as if he held a knife to Wall Street's throat. Finally, Harrison stood, walked to the window, and stared down at the rushing traffic below. He turned back, voice curt. "Fine, I'll test this. A small investment, just to see if you're for real." Marcus gave a slow nod. No joy, no panic, only the faint trace of a razor-sharp smile. Harrison went on. "I'll have my team run the Dunford move. If it plays out like you say, maybe you'll get another chance here. But if you're wrong," Marcus cut him off, calm but chilling. "If I'm wrong, you'll lose a few million. But if I'm right, you'll owe a janitor your entire career." The words froze Harrison for a moment. Then he let out a short laugh, half mocking, half intrigued. "All right, I like crazy men." Marcus closed his notebook and stood. His heart was pounding, but his steps were steady. He knew this moment was the doorway to something bigger. As he left the building, Marcus inhaled deeply. For the first time in his life, he wasn't an outsider cleaning the floor. He was a player, however small, on the board. And deep inside, Marcus knew. Sometimes a single pawn, if moved the right way, could topple an entire game. That Monday, the game had truly begun. Tuesday morning, the news tickers flashing across Manhattan screamed, "Dunford Capital stock in turmoil." Red numbers bled across the screens, sending investors into panic. But inside his office, Harrison sat back with arms crossed, watching coldly. He had tested Marcus's tip. A modest investment, not too big, just enough that if it failed, they'd lose a few million. But now, everything was unfolding exactly as Marcus predicted. Dunford's hidden debts were surfacing, the cracks were widening, and the market was in chaos. While his staff scrambled, Harrison picked up the phone and gave a simple order. Buy more. Double it. Across town, Marcus sat in his usual corner at the tiny cafe, eyes fixed on the TV mounted on the wall. The Dunford Capital logo filled the screen, along with the headline, Crisis of Confidence. He sipped his cheap coffee, a faint smirk curling his lips. He knew he had lit a fuse, and the bomb was exploding in the heart of Wall Street. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Marcus, my office, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Marcus stared at the message, heartbeat quickening. This was no longer a test. This was an invitation to the real arena. Closing the phone, his eyes burned with fire. From a janitor fired on a Friday afternoon, he had now forced one of Wall Street's titans to call his name directly. The game had grown far, beyond a small bet. And Marcus knew this was only the beginning. A.M. sharp. Marcus walked into the building in his familiar second-hand suit, but this time he didn't need to invent an appointment. The receptionist glanced up, then nodded. Mr. Harrison is expecting you. The elevator doors closed, carrying him to the top floor, a place he once only glimpsed from the basement parking lot, a place where the powerful sipped expensive wine while trading sums a janitor could never dream of. The boardroom doors opened. Harrison sat at the head of a long table, flanked by a row of stone-faced executives. Bright lights poured down, making the room feel less like a meeting and more like a courtroom. And Marcus, the nobody, entered like a defendant. A blond executive with glasses tilted his chin and sneered, "This is your source, Harrison." A guy in a cheap suit. Laughter rippled around the table. Marcus heard it all. But instead of anger, he calmly placed his notebook on the table and spoke slowly. "Go ahead. Laugh. Laugh just like Dunford Capital did." Before their stock crashed yesterday, the laughter died. The room fell into uneasy silence. Harrison leaned back, arms folded, eyes narrowed. "Marcus, they don't believe you. Give them a reason." Marcus opened his notebook, flipped to the next page. He placed his hand on the numbers, then locked eyes with each smug face across the table. "Here are 3 more companies, all using the same accounting trick as Dunford. If you want, I can prove it right here, and help you make hundreds of millions before the market catches on." The room froze. The arrogant eyes flickered with doubt, with curiosity. Marcus knew he had just dropped another bomb on the table, and this time it exploded right in the faces of men who once thought he was nothing more than a shadow mopping their floors. Marcus flipped to another page, tapping his pen-stained notes with a finger. No slides, no projector, just a battered notebook. But his voice cut through the boardroom like a blade. "This is Helix Trust. You praise them for 20% growth each quarter. But look closer, revenue is up, yet actual cash flow is negative. Why? Because they're hiding bad debt through so-called partnership agreements. A classic con." One executive near the door chuckled dismissively. That's absurd. Helix Trust was praised in Forbes just last week." Marcus looked up, smiling dryly. "Sure, Forbes praised Dunford too. And the next day, you all saw what happened." The laughter died. The room stiffened. Harrison leaned forward, eyes glinting with rare focus. Marcus pressed on, every word a punch to their gut. "You call this success?" "I call it a ticking time bomb. And if you're smart, you'll place your bets before it blows." Some of the executives exchanged uneasy glances, their smugness gone. They saw the unshakable confidence in Marcus's eyes. Worse, they saw that his logic was airtight. Harrison drummed his fingers on the table, slowly. "Marcus, go on." Marcus gave a small nod. He knew he had just won the most valuable thing on Wall Street. Attention. Marcus took a slow breath, then carefully closed his notebook. The room was so silent the shuffle of paper sounded like thunder. He raised his head, locking eyes with every face around the table, faces once smug, now frozen like schoolchildren caught cheating. "You can keep laughing at me. You can dismiss a janitor. But numbers don't lie. And if you don't act, someone else will." The air grew heavier. One of the loudest executives from earlier cleared his throat awkwardly, looking away from Marcus's gaze. The sneers were gone, replaced with silence and calculation. Harrison stayed still for a moment, then suddenly rose, slamming his palm on the table. "Enough, Marcus gets a chance. If you don't believe him, fine, sit it out. But don't come crying when you miss the opportunity." Murmurs rippled across the room. Some faces tightened in disapproval, others gleamed with curiosity. But one thing was clear. No one dared call Marcus a nobody anymore. Marcus stood, tucked his notebook under his arm, and gave a slight nod. His heart pounded like a drum, yet his steps out of the boardroom were steady, proud. He knew, today, he was no longer the janitor. Today, he had carved his mark. Marcus, the man who made Wall Street fall silent. And this was only the beginning. Thursday morning. Harrison's office buzzed like a shaken beehive. Staff sprinted across the floor, phones rang off the hook, screens flashed with wild charts. But amid the chaos, Marcus sat calmly at the long table, notebook open, pen in hand. In front of him lay the files on Helix Trust, the company he had dissected in yesterday's meeting. The executives were still skeptical, but Harrison had already given the order. "We bet." According to Marcus, the tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. A young assistant, pale-faced, whispered nervously, "Mr. Harrison, we're talking tens of millions here. If this goes wrong—" Harrison cut him off sharply. "You think I'd risk this on a janitor if I didn't see reason? Do it." Marcus remained silent, though inside his pulse thundered. He knew this wasn't a test anymore. This was real money, real blood, and Harrison's reputation tied now to his own. If he failed, there would be no second chance. He pointed to the chart, voice steady. "Wait 2 more hours. When they release their quarterly report, the stock will crash. That's your window." The room held its breath. 2 hours crawled by like 2 years. Then, the big screen lit up with breaking news. Helix Trust reports unexpected losses. Shares plunge 18% in first 15 minutes. The room erupted. Shouts of triumph, gasps of disbelief, the phones exploding with calls from panicked rivals. Harrison shot up from his chair, slamming his palm on the table, eyes blazing. "God almighty, you were right, Marcus. We just made nearly 40 million in one morning." Marcus sat quietly, lips pressed together. Not because of the money. He once couldn't dream of scraping together a few hundred for his daughter's tuition. But because he had just proven what no one ever believed. A janitor could make Wall Street dance to his tune. After the Helix Trust play, the atmosphere in Harrison's office shifted completely. The executives who once sneered at Marcus now sat upright, their eyes fixed on him with a mix of curiosity and caution. No one dared interrupt him anymore, and every time he flipped open his notebook, the room seemed to hold its breath. Harrison was different too. He walked over, laid a heavy hand on Marcus's shoulder, and spoke in a low but firm voice. "From today, you're not a guest anymore, Marcus. You're my advisor. And if you want, this will be your place to prove you're more than just lucky." Marcus paused for a moment. In his heart, an image of his daughter, Sarah, flashed vividly. The tuition fees that once haunted him now felt within reach. But with this opportunity came a doorway into something else, a world of schemes, where one misstep could bring everything crashing down. He raised his head, meeting Harrison's eyes directly. "I'm not here chasing luck. I'm chasing justice. And if you give me a chance, I'll prove that sometimes justice comes from the ones you least expect." The room fell silent. Then Harrison burst into laughter, clapping Marcus on the shoulder so hard the chair rattled. "You're insane, Marcus. But maybe that kind of insanity is exactly what will make us richer than anyone else." In that moment, Marcus knew. He was no longer an outsider looking in at Wall Street. He was at the table now, and every number, every decision, carried the weight to topple a company or an entire economy. And right there, Marcus's journey truly began, from fired janitor to a real player in the billion-dollar game. That afternoon, while Harrison left for a closed-door meeting, Marcus remained in the office with several senior executives. The air was heavy. No mocking laughter this time, only silence thick with calculation. A tall, silver-haired director adjusted his glasses and spoke in a low tone. "Marcus, isn't it? You're clever, I'll give you that. But remember this. Wall Street isn't a place for outsiders. One wrong step, and they'll grind you to dust." Another chimed in, voice smooth as honey but laced with thorns. "We've never seen Harrison place his trust in someone so quickly. You must be special, but you should know, that kind of special might cost some people their seats. Marcus lifted his head, locking eyes with the veiled threat. He understood instantly. He wasn't their concern because he might be wrong. He was their concern because he might be right. Every time he was right, their power shook. With a faint smile, he replied calmly but firmly, "I'm not here to steal chairs. I'm here to prove that even a janitor can see what others choose to ignore. If that costs someone their seat, then the fault isn't mine. It's theirs." The room fell silent. A challenge had been issued, not shouted, but carved deep enough to mark a clear line between Marcus and the powerful men before him. As Marcus walked out, he felt the weight of their eyes stabbing into his back. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just battling the ruthless market. He was now fighting the hidden knives behind polite smiles. That night, Marcus returned to his small Brooklyn apartment. The city outside buzzed with life, but his room was silent. Only the scratching of his pen across the battered notebook. He recorded every detail of the day, the Helix Trust play, the board's reaction, and especially the suspicious eyes that lingered behind him. As he wrote, a faint click sounded at the door. Someone had slipped an envelope under the crack.
Marcus picked it up.
It was thick. Inside, a stack of crisp bills and a hastily scribbled note. "Stay away from Harrison. This is your final warning." Marcus froze. He flipped through the cash. More money than he had made in an entire year of janitorial work. Someone wanted him gone, silent, before he got too far. He sat down and let out a dry laugh. It wasn't joy. It was the laugh of a man who had suffered too much humiliation to ever be scared again. He crumpled the note and tossed it into the trash. "You think I'll walk away for a stack of bills?" he muttered, voice steel hard. "Your mistake was showing me you're already afraid." Outside his window, the city lights glimmered bright, but in the shadows a silent war had begun. Marcus knew. Tomorrow would no longer be just about proving himself. Tomorrow would be about survival. The next morning, Marcus walked into Harrison's office. Same second-hand suit, but his eyes were different. Colder, sharper, and alert. He knew last night's envelope wasn't a prank. It was a warning shot, signaling the start of a hidden war. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was strangely tense. Some executives avoided Marcus's gaze. Others forced fake smiles as if they had never mocked him. But Marcus felt it. Behind those polished suits, knives were being sharpened. Harrison entered, slamming a stack of files onto the table. "We've got a new target. Orion Holdings. Everyone thinks they're solid, but Marcus believes they're on the brink." The room stirred. A young executive, voice dripping with sarcasm, fixed his eyes on Marcus. "You called Helix Trust, sure. You won once, but maybe that was luck. What now? You gonna prove it with that shabby notebook of yours?" Laughter rippled again, but this time Marcus didn't flinch. He rose, slowly stepped to the center of the room, and opened his notebook. His voice rang out, steady and sharp, bouncing off the glass walls. "Orion Holdings has a fatal flaw. They're propped up by ghost investments, shell companies, fabricated cash flow. I've tracked the way they hide it for 2 years, and if you want, I can show you right now." The laughter died instantly. Silence blanketed the room. Harrison folded his arms, gave a slight nod, signaling Marcus to go on. At that moment, Marcus knew this wasn't just about one deal. He was staring down an entire system, deciding whether to accept him as a real player or crush him where he stood. Marcus flipped open his notebook, turning to a page crammed with numbers and scribbled arrows. He laid it flat in the center of the table, the overhead light catching every faded line of ink. "Orion Holdings reports net profits up 15% for 3 straight quarters," Marcus began, voice steady. "But if you look at their actual cash flow, there's a paradox. No real money is coming in. So, where's it coming from?" One director frowned, snapping back, "From investments, obviously." Marcus nodded, a hint of a dry smile tugging at his lips. "Investments? Or should I say, shell companies? Take Silvercrest LLC. Sounds respectable. But I checked. It's nothing but an empty office in New Jersey. No staff, no activity, just numbers on paper to puff up Orion's reports." He flipped a few more pages, tapping his pen rhythmically. "And it's not just one. I found 7 such companies, all funded by Orion. In reality, they're cycling money between shells, manufacturing the illusion of profit. It's a domino waiting to fall." The room went silent. Another executive finally spoke, voice unsteady. Where did you get this information? Marcus locked eyes with him, voice sharp as steel. From the things you call trash. A forgotten invoice. A misfiled report thrown in a bin. I just did the one thing none of you ever bothered to do. I picked it up and read it. No one laughed now. The mocking eyes had turned into ones filled with unease and dread. Harrison leaned back, arms folded, the faintest smirk tugging at his mouth. Marcus knew he had just slammed another major card onto the table, and the echo of it falling would be heard all across Wall Street. The air in the boardroom grew heavy. All eyes were locked on Marcus's battered notebook, the unlikely weapon that had just stripped Orion Holdings bare. A young slick-haired director slammed his hand on the table. We can't trust the word of a janitor. If he's wrong, we could lose hundreds of millions, not to mention our reputation. Another director, tougher in demeanor, shot back immediately. And what if he's right? Dunford and Helix already proved him. You'd throw away a fortune just to protect your pride? The room erupted into clashing voices. Some called Marcus reckless, others eyed him as the golden key. Marcus sat silently, eyes scanning each face, saying nothing. He knew he'd dropped a bomb. Now all he had to do was watch them scramble in the blast. Finally, Harrison raised his hand, his voice slicing through the noise like a blade. Enough! Marcus has been right twice. And on Wall Street, 2 wins in a row isn't luck. I'm placing another bet. Several directors growled in protest, their faces twisted with frustration. One of them glared at Marcus, eyes cold as ice, and muttered through clenched teeth. Fine. But when this blows up, don't forget, it's him who dragged us all to hell. Marcus met the glare with a calm, unflinching smile. Inside, he understood. His enemies weren't just out there in the market anymore. They were sitting right here in this room. The meeting adjourned. The directors filed out one by one, their faces cold, their polite smiles thin and brittle. Marcus rose, notebook in hand, ready to leave, when he caught whispers leaking from a side room along the hall. He froze, footsteps light as a cat. Through the crack of a half-closed door, he recognized the voice. It was the very director who mocked him the most. We can't let that man keep influencing things. Harrison's blinded by him. If this Orion play works, our positions are finished. Another voice answered, flat and sharp. Then it's simple. We let him fail. Just once. One mistake and Harrison will turn on him. After that, he'll vanish as quickly as he appeared. Marcus gripped his notebook tighter. His pulse pounded, but his face remained calm. He stepped back, walked away down the hall as if he had heard nothing. Outside, the night wind whipped across his face. He let out a dry, bitter laugh. You want me to fail? Fine. But you've forgotten one thing. I've lived my whole life in failure. That's exactly why I can't be broken. In the shadows, the battle was no longer just about money. It was survival, and Marcus knew. In the next chapter, he would be facing not just the market, but enemies seated at his very own table. The next morning, New York's sky hung unusually dark. Storm clouds gathered as if foreshadowing a greater storm ahead. Marcus walked into Harrison's tower, eyes blazing, battered notebook clutched under his arm. He knew. Today wasn't just about Orion Holdings. It was about surviving the knives pointed at him inside the room. The boardroom felt like lead, every eye fixed on Marcus, some probing, some doubtful, some dripping with hostility. Only Harrison sat calmly, hands folded, watching the board like a chess master. Marcus, Harrison's deep voice rolled through the room. Today is the third test. This isn't practice anymore. This investment is big enough to make, or break, this firm. Marcus drew a deep breath. He stepped to the head of the table, opened his notebook. On the page, numbers and arrows sprawled like a battle map. Orion Holdings, he said slowly, each word deliberate, will release a fabricated report within 48 hours. When they do, the stock will soar. But it's smoke and mirrors. If we bet against that rise, if we short the illusion, this will be a reversal Wall Street has never seen. One director narrowed his eyes, voice dripping with sarcasm. And if you're wrong, Marcus, if your luck runs out this time, Marcus lifted his gaze, eyes like steel, then I'll fall. But I've spent my whole life falling and getting back up. And if I'm right, then every one of you will have to say my name. The room went dead silent. Harrison's lips curled into the faintest grin. Meanwhile, across the table, fists clenched on armrests like beasts cornered in their own den. Marcus knew. This wasn't just another trade. This was the battle that would define him. Marcus walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and began sketching. Arrows, numbers, and lines crisscrossed into a web of finance. His voice was slow, deliberate, every word cutting through the tension. This is when Orion releases their false report. The market will believe it and pour money in. Within the first 24 hours, the stock could soar as high as 25%. But right after, once the numbers are questioned, it will crash hard. If we time it right, we triple our returns. Some executives sat in silence, eyes fixed on his plan. But in the corner, the silver-haired director, the one who had threatened Marcus, smirked faintly. Under the table, he pulled out his phone and tapped out a series of quick messages. Marcus noticed, but pretended not to. Inside, he knew the trap was already set. Someone would make sure he failed once to destroy his credibility. Harrison slammed his pen against the table, breaking the silence. Marcus leads. We follow. The room erupted in murmurs, some grim, some anxious. But Marcus stood tall, eyes sweeping across the room, voice calm but unyielding. You want me to fail. I know. But remember this. If I fall, I'll drag down everyone who laughed at me. The declaration cracked through the boardroom like thunder. Across the table, leather chairs creaked as fists tightened. Marcus could feel it. Orion wasn't just a financial play. It was a survival match, pitting him against enemies waiting in the shadows. Trading day began. On massive screens, Orion Holdings stock glowed green. News anchors shouted, Orion posts record profits, shares surge. Just as Marcus predicted, the stock skyrocketed, investors swarming like bees to honey. Inside Harrison's office, the tension was suffocating. Staff hammered keyboards, phones rang nonstop. One director smirked, muttering just loud enough for Marcus to hear, He's dragging us all down. Watch. Marcus sat still, eyes locked on the charts. Panic was the trap. He wouldn't step into it. He tapped his pen slowly against the desk, steady rhythm. Wait, this wave is just foam. The real current is coming. Harrison trusted him. But some directors didn't. One secretly signaled an aide to dump a small block of shares, hoping to prove Marcus wrong. The move stalled Orion's rise briefly, stirring murmurs in the market. Marcus spotted it instantly. He spun around, eyes sharp as blades. Who interfered? I said patience. One wrong move and the whole board shifts. No one spoke, but the silence was enough. He knew someone inside wanted him to fail. On the screen, Orion stock kept climbing. 10%, 15%, 20%. A few directors chuckled, smug. See, Marcus? You're wrong. The price keeps going up. Marcus narrowed his eyes, voice calm, yet unshakable. Let it climb. The higher it goes, the harder it crashes. And when it crashes, I'll look you in the eye. The boardroom went quiet, thick with dread. Behind the crooked smiles, Marcus felt it clearly. The trap was closing. And this time, if he stumbled, they wouldn't let him rise again. Phones rang off the hook. On the big screen, Orion Holdings chart froze at a 22% climb. Then a flood of headlines flashed across the side monitors. SEC launches review of Orion's financial statements. Analysts question transparency of Orion's investments. The room erupted into chaos. Directors leapt to their feet, shouting orders at panicked staff. Some barked frantically into phones, dumping shares, their voices trembling. Damn it! Who leaked this? Marcus rose slowly. No shouting, no panic. He placed a steady hand on the table, eyes locked on the screen. This is it. This is the moment I was waiting for. Within 10 minutes, Orion's stock nosedived. Down 18%, 25%, then 30%. The red numbers bled like open wounds. Swears filled the air, but Marcus simply smiled. A cold, satisfied smile. Harrison sprang to his feet, eyes blazing, and turned to Marcus. You did it! God Almighty, you really did it! But even amid the cheers, Marcus felt the daggers in the room, the hateful stares of directors who wanted him crushed. He knew this victory wouldn't erase his enemies. If anything, it had made them more determined to destroy him. Clutching his notebook tightly, Marcus whispered with steel in his voice, Let them come. I've waited my whole life to prove. A janitor can bring Wall Street to its knees. And so ended Chapter 6, with triumph painted in blood-red numbers and the drumbeat of a deadlier war just beginning. The Orion victory sent Marcus's name echoing through Wall Street's towers. The press hailed him as the mysterious outsider who predicted the crash. One headline screamed, From janitor to Wall Street genius, an unbelievable rise. For the first time in his life, Marcus couldn't walk the streets unnoticed. Reporters swarmed him, cameras flashing, microphones shoved at his face. "Marcus, how did you know Orion would fall? Is it true you were once a janitor? Are you going to become a CEO?" He only offered a faint smile, dodging answers. Inside, Marcus knew the spotlight was as dangerous as it was bright. Meanwhile, in discreet Manhattan offices, a different scene unfolded. Cold faces sat around a polished oak table, no smiles. One man slammed his fist down. "We can't let a janitor disrupt the order. He has to disappear before he becomes a symbol." Another hissed through his teeth. "Harrison staked his reputation on him. If we strike Marcus, Harrison falls too. Two birds with one stone." Unaware of their plotting, Marcus sat in his small apartment, eyes on a framed photo of his daughter Sarah, smiling brightly. He whispered, "I did it, sweetheart. But you don't know. The real storm is only beginning." Harrison sat in his private office, swirling a glass of golden whiskey. He looked at Marcus with a smile that was hard to read. "Marcus," Harrison said, voice low and gravelly, "you're no amateur anymore. Dunford, Helix, Orion, 3 straight wins. It's time you step into the real game. Billion-dollar deals." Marcus stayed silent, eyes thoughtful. He knew every step deeper into this world meant leaving normal life further behind. But the image of Sarah, his daughter, filled his mind. He needed her future secured, and this path was the only way forward. "All right," Marcus said simply. "Show me the next move." Just then the door burst open. A young aide rushed in, face pale. "Mr. Harrison, we've got a problem. Rumors are spreading across the market. Marcus, Harrison's new advisor, is a fraud, exaggerating data for profit." The room stiffened. Harrison scowled, but Marcus leaned back calmly in his chair. He knew the enemy had made their first move. "Where's it coming from?" Harrison growled. The aide shook his head nervously. "Unclear. But several funds have heard it and are already pulling back from anything tied to you." Marcus gave a cold, thin smile. "So it begins, fine. Let them try. I've lived my life in contempt. A rumor won't kill me." He leaned forward, voice low but resonant. "Instead, I'll turn their lies into an opportunity. And when the truth comes out, they'll be the ones who lose everything." The rumor spread like wildfire. Financial networks buzzed with chatter. Was Marcus just lucky? Is Harrison's new advisor a fraud? Stocks tied to Harrison began to wobble. In the boardroom, several directors eyed Marcus with open suspicion. One sneered, "Perhaps we've placed too much faith in a janitor." Marcus didn't react immediately. He let the room fill with doubt before slowly rising to his feet. He flipped quickly through his notebook and slammed it onto the table. "You want proof?" His voice rang steady, cutting through the tension. "Fine. Here are Orion's internal figures from the last 3 years, compiled from scraps you all dismissed as trash. Here's the evidence of the shell companies they used to inflate profits. And this," he pulled out a crumpled photocopy of an invoice, "is a document signed by an Orion director himself. He tossed it in the garbage. I picked it up." "You didn't." Shock rippled through the room. A few directors leaned in, scanning the evidence, their faces paling. Harrison smirked, fingers drumming slowly on the table. "So," Marcus continued, eyes sweeping the room, "if they want to call me a fraud, let the market decide. Tomorrow, when Orion's real numbers are exposed, we'll see who the real fool is." He leaned forward, voice low, sharp as a blade. "Rumors don't weaken me. They prove my enemies are already afraid." Silence blanketed the boardroom. Even those who mocked him were left speechless. The next morning, Wall Street held its breath. Everyone was waiting for Orion Holdings' report. Rumors about Marcus still flooded the airwaves. Critics sneered, calling him a washed-up lucky guesser. 8 a.m. The official report dropped. Minutes later, headlines exploded like bombs. Orion Holdings admits fake investments. Stock plunges 35%. The market reeled. Funds that had backed Marcus roared with celebration. Inside Harrison's office, cheers erupted, employees hugging each other in disbelief. The directors who once mocked Marcus sat frozen, faces pale. One muttered under his breath, "No, impossible." He was right a 4th time? Marcus stood in the middle of the chaos, notebook in hand, a faint smile playing on his lips. No shouting, no defense. The truth spoke louder than he ever could. Harrison strode over, clapping Marcus hard on the shoulder, voice booming with triumph. "You've turned rumor into a joke, Marcus! From now on, no one will dare call you an outsider. You're part of the game." Outside, the press went wild. This time, they didn't call Marcus lucky. They gave him a new title: the Janitor of Wall Street, the man who made the market bow. Marcus closed his eyes, drawing a deep breath. He knew this victory wasn't the end. It was gasoline on the fire burning in the shadows, where enemies plotted in silence. And when he opened his eyes again, a whisper echoed inside him. "Let them come. I'm ready." The Orion victory was still fresh, but Marcus had already become the hottest name on Wall Street. The press praised him, investors chased him, and Harrison leaned on him more than ever, as if Marcus were his secret weapon. But in the shadows, another hand was moving. In a sealed room, powerful figures sat around a long ebony table, the golden light casting them like statues. A gravel-voiced man spoke first. "Enough. Marcus has crossed the line. He's making Harrison stronger while we lose control. If this continues, soon the whole market will follow him." Another nodded, voice cold as steel. "Then we make him fall, not just in the market, but in reputation. A man who lives on credibility is nothing once it's gone." The plan was drawn. Spread whispers that Marcus manipulated insider information, that his trades were rigged. At the same time, set a trap, a company that looked weak but was engineered to bait Marcus into a fatal move. Meanwhile, Marcus sat alone in his small apartment, eyes fixed on a photo of his daughter. He felt the storm coming, but instead of fear, he felt a strange calm. "They called me worthless all my life," Marcus whispered. "Now they fear me enough to build traps. Fine. They don't realize I've lived in traps my whole life, and always found a way out." Outside, the city never slept. In the glow of neon, the final battle was taking shape. The battle that would decide whether Marcus became a legend, or just another star snuffed out too soon. One morning, as Marcus and Harrison reviewed market reports, a new name flashed across the screens: Artemis Capital. Financial outlets hailed Artemis as the rising star, boasting of promising investments and staggering profits. Some directors lit up with excitement, nudging Harrison. "This is golden. We need to get in before it's too late." Marcus narrowed his eyes, tapping his notebook slowly. It felt familiar? Too familiar. "No," Marcus said firmly. "Artemis isn't an opportunity. It's bait." The room turned to him, a few smirks spreading. One director sneered. "Another one of the janitor's hunches. Marcus, just because you've been right a few times doesn't mean you can stop the market from making money." Marcus didn't snap back. Instead, he opened his notebook, flipped to a page, and laid out a web of arrows and names. Tiny companies strung together like chess pieces. Artemis is just a mask. Behind it is a chain of shell companies just like Orion. But there's one difference. This time, it's built as a trap. For me. They want me to bite, to finally prove me wrong. The air shifted. Harrison frowned, staring hard at Marcus. "You're certain?" Marcus lifted his gaze, eyes blazing. "I'm certain, and I won't just avoid their trap. I'll turn it around, make it devour the very people who built it." Across the room, a few directors stiffened, because Marcus had just spoken their worst fear aloud. He had smelled blood. Before the knife was even drawn, Marcus rose, walked to the whiteboard, and drew a large circle. Inside it he wrote Artemis Capital. Then he connected smaller circles like a spider's web, each labeled with shell companies, shady funds, and even a few familiar director names. "This isn't just a company," he said slowly but firmly. "It's a trap. They want me to jump in and lose my credibility. But if we pretend to play along and track every flow of money, we'll uncover who's pulling the strings." A few directors chuckled, dripping with sarcasm. "Sounds like a Hollywood movie, Marcus. You really think you can turn the market into your personal game?" Marcus turned, eyes sharp as blades. "This game was never mine. It's always been yours. The game where men in high chairs decide who wins and who's destroyed. I'm just changing the rules. This time, the prey becomes the hunter." Harrison leaned back, chuckling softly, eyes glinting with intrigue. "Then we let Marcus lead. But remember, this is the biggest gamble yet. If we fail, we don't just lose money, we lose everything." Marcus nodded. He knew that better than anyone. But inside, his resolve was ironclad, not just to win, but to drag the hidden players into the light. Snapping his notebook shut, He declared with steel in his voice, "They want to trap me? Fine. But they'll never see it coming when they realize they were the prey all along." The day Artemis Capital released its report, Wall Street went wild. Their stock soared. The press screamed, "The market's new rising star." Directors who doubted Marcus smirked, waiting for him to crash. But Marcus stayed calm. He was waiting for the perfect moment. When the stock hit its peak, Harrison suddenly gave the order. "Short it. All of it." The boardroom froze. One director shouted, "Are you insane? This is a golden opportunity, not a risk." Marcus met their eyes, voice sharp as steel. "You're right, it is an opportunity. But not yours. Artemis isn't a star, it's a balloon, and you're about to watch it pop." Hours later, the headlines exploded. Artemis Capital under investigation for accounting fraud. Web of shell companies exposed. The stock collapsed like a waterfall. Those who had waited for Marcus to fail turned ghost pale, while Harrison roared with laughter, the sound booming through the room. Marcus sat quietly, notebook in hand, eyes blazing. He hadn't just survived their trap, he had turned it into a weapon, forcing his enemies to destroy themselves. The press screamed again, "Janitor outsmarts Wall Street again, from fired to legend." That night, Marcus returned to his small apartment. Sarah ran into his arms, her eyes shining with pride. Marcus smiled, whispering, "I promised you a different life, sweetheart. And now, we have it." Outside, Wall Street still buzzed with noise, lies, and greed. But in that moment, Marcus knew he had done the impossible, from a janitor fired on a Friday, to the man who made the market kneel by Monday, and his story would live on as legend.